Yeah.
Good morning here on Wednesday morning, March, whatever it is here, 25th, 2026. We've been having a hard time getting the committee together since the 4 times and extended piece. The purpose of this morning is to, we walked through most of the Ways and Means Amendment on Friday. We weren't able to meet yesterday. Today, I was hoping that the JFO would give us a brief, quick overview of the money change in the Ways and Means Amendment portion, and then I'll hear from the agency on their opinion of the change, and then we're going to straw poll the amendment, and then I want to hear from anybody that has a concern about whether they will or won't be ready to go with their floor report. We'll go off that we can handle administratively after the fact, but we want to make sure we still do have the opportunity to ask the speaker for a delay of 1 legislative day if we felt we needed it, but I, in general, think we're mostly ready to go.
Today or tomorrow?
Whether we're ready to go today or we would need 1 day to delay to continue to get ready. We're on the second reading today unless we ask for a postponement. So, Logan, if you wouldn't mind coming up for a second, I appreciate it. And basically what I'm looking for is particularly the money piece related to the 2.2 million, the 500,000 versus the 1.7, and make sure the committee understands what was done there. The rest of it we went through almost entirely on Friday.
All right, for the record, Logan Mover with the Joint Fiscal Office. In front of you and on the screen, and I don't know if it's probably not today, maybe yesterday or the day before, this fiscal note from, or as recommended by the House Committee on Ways and Means, should be on your page somewhere. If not, I will send it to Gabby again in a second if you can post it. Specifically based around, so there's the 2 sections the chair mentioned. It's the sort of change the mileage-based user fee. And then also there is a transfer of Transportation Infrastructure Bond Fund into the T Fund. And there's some stuff happening there. So I'll just sort of walk through them briefly. So the mileage-based user fee, there were a number of changes.
Which I see 3 documents from yesterday.
But I'm
Means is on Friday.
Friday.
So that's
Perfect.
what you're looking at.
Yeah, so the one from Ways and Means, as recommended by Ways and Means, what was that?
We're not looking at the updated fiscal note.
No, so there's 2 fiscal notes. There's one as the bill passed out of this committee, and then the one as recommended by Ways and Means. Right now, we're looking at the one recommended by Ways and Means.
Okay, thank you.
1.2, yes. So I won't go through all the changes that occurred in the mileage-based user fee. I think Damien has a good walkthrough or side by side to sort of break that down better. But as far as the money is related, the sort of estimate that I came up with when looking at this, based on the fact that when the MBUF would first start being collected, right, because there's sort of a lag period between your first register or your first inspection and then your second inspection. After your second inspection, you get assessed an MBUF, and then there's some sort of you could either pay all up front, or you could pay quarterly, or you could pay monthly. So there's a breakdown there. Essentially, in fiscal year 27, the MBUF wouldn't be bringing in any revenue because there'd be no one actually paying it yet. But you would still have the repeal of the EV infrastructure fee, which is that $89 fee. That would go into place January 1st. So we would lose the revenue from that. I estimate about $500,000, and we wouldn't yet be gaining any revenue from the MBUF. FY28, we would start to see some revenue come in from the MBUF, but because revenue collections would sort of start in the second half of 28, and then you also have some people be paying all at once, some people will be paying quarterly, some people will be paying monthly. It could fluctuate between, I estimate, around $350,000 to maybe $1 million if everyone sort of paid all at once. The loss from the repeal of the EV infrastructure fee roughly $1.2 million. So less of a net revenue loss in FY 28, between maybe 200,000 and up to $850,000. And then in 29, everyone is sort of in the MBUF system and paying revenue generated around $2.6 million against revenue loss of 1.4 from the repeal of the EV infrastructure fee. For then the net revenue in 29, 1.2, and then that would continue to grow in the future years as EVs grow and the like.
Question.
So that's Representative Keyser.
Yeah, so, yeah, I've got a disconnect here. The infrastructure fee is not being charged in 29. So we won't see that as a loss of revenue in 29. What we will see only, if this is a question, rhetorical, 2.6 million. And so really the net revenue that is shown here is 1.2. Really what we're going to see when we see the 29 FY is 2.6.
2.6 from the MBUF, correct? But if the MBUF wasn't in place, we wouldn't.
I get it, but that's not what we're going to see. When we see the budget, we're going to see 2.6 from the MBUF revenue.
Correct.
And that's it.
But current forecast assumes, so the current numbers you see in the forecast assume that we're getting the EV infrastructure fee. That's no longer going to be the case. So you will see 2.6 coming in from the MBUF estimated, but also they will take out the estimated money coming in from the EV infrastructure fee.
But
1.4 million.
Okay, I guess I'm disconnected. I'm sorry to take time, but we're not charging for it. You can't. So are you saying that there's somewhere out there in the world that they had 1.4 million for in 29?
Probably not that exact number, but the forecast
but
in
a
general assumes, because the forecast goes out, we have until 31 right now.
Okay.
Assuming that we're going to be collecting the EV infrastructure fee the entire time until an MBUF goes in place and it is repealed. So the forecast currently expects some revenue from that fee.
So, okay, got it. So this is a variance on forecast.
Yes.
But what we're going to see when we get all done is when we see our 29 budget, we're going to just see 2.6, period, end of story.
Yeah. Assuming this goes into place.
Yeah, oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Representative McCoy.
That was my question. At what point were we not going to see the infrastructure fee?
So you won't see the infrastructure fee after January 1st, 2027,
Okay,
if this goes into place right
so
now.
you're just showing it here as if we still have it in place, this is what.
This is what revenue
This is
would
the
be
net
generated,
revenue
so it's sort of
Okay.
you would be losing this out by implementing this
Okay.
because we would expect to collect this in the
Yeah.
future.
Now, this money doesn't stay in the transportation anyway.
So yeah, language currently has this going to ACCD for the EV infrastructure
Okay.
build out.
I'm gonna slide over here for a second.
Sure, Christopher Trentfiscal, I just wanted to reiterate to what Logan said and add a little clarity that when we do the revenue forecast, when the economists do the revenue forecast, they assume current law. So whenever the law changes, after each session, we talk to them in June and say, here's all the things that change. So one of those things would be, hey, that EV infrastructure fee, you need to peel it off as of this year. I also wanted to mention that these numbers are shown going out to 29. The forecast shows out to 31. We really, by law, look at 2 fiscal years. When you start going beyond that, it reminds me of like those weather maps you see in hurricane season with that like cone of uncertainty. Things get really fuzzy when you start going beyond the 2-year horizon. So that is my long way of saying the numbers that you see for like FY 29, take that just with a grain of salt all the time. Because those are subject to significant change.
Representative White.
Logan, can you remind us what approximately how much money is coming in from the EV infrastructure fee in 26? Is it about?
I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that in the FY 27 budget you're currently working on, there is $1 million going appropriated to ACCD for that program. So I'd have to go look at the schedule too and see what the exact collections are, but that off the top of my head, that's what I have.
Representative Pat.
There'll still be an EV, plug-in hybrid EV, and that doesn't change, although
Although
the money goes
just into the fund, yep, correct.
starting in 2027.
27, yep. I believe that's the effective date of that section.
Thank you very much.
And just, well, the one last thing then, that you had mentioned is, so remembering this sort of estimated net revenue loss of $500,000. This transfer that is being proposed in section 23 is transferring $2.2 million from the TIB fund into the T fund. It is then spending $1.7 million of that to be used for town highway aid, and then it's leaving $500,000 in the T fund, sort of to make up for the estimated potential revenue loss from this MBUF.
It's in the T fund as opposed to the TIB bond fund, then
Correct.
it'll be transferred into the T fund. Okay.
Isn't the
Representative Keefe?
Isn't the TIP fund integral to the numbers that we see that come in from for the revenue forecast for the AOT?
Yes, and the TIB had a sort of extra amount that had been carried for a few years. In 27, it's going to be $2.2 million. It's not going to be spent on anything. It's just sort of sitting. So this would.
So if that's included in the in our overall revenue forecast that the committee looks at, maybe what we're seeing here is the Ways and Means deciding to do policy for our committee.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, so in terms of what we had been looking at was the local option tax. And that amount of money was going to be less than 1.7. What was
In
that?
FY27 is less than $200,000. I'd have to go back and look. I think like 195, maybe it's the current estimate based
For
on.
the whole thing to be divided. among
Well, yeah, so it's from the excess local option tax revenue that came in after you sort of paid these current requirements as laid out in the language you all put forward. I think the estimate, when you sort of do that math, is there'd be about $400,000 extra in local option tax revenue. Half of that would go to town highway aid, so around 200,000, I think
to be
slightly less.
divided among all the towns.
To divide among, yes, every town,
And now this 1.7 will be divided among
all of them, yes.
as more of a one-time.
Yes, this will be one-time funding,
one-time.
Yeah.
So it'll be a lot more, but it won't be ongoing. So that's really the difference.
yep.
Well, that, I would also say that the piece of the pilot would have been an ongoing and growing
Yeah.
portion versus our current transportation scenario where most of our funding is flat or declining. Would be that portion of it, but this in overall money right now is more, for sure. Representative Corbett?
I just had a question. I don't know if you can answer it, Logan, but when we set up the TID fund years ago, there's, rules that we had to follow, like you couldn't call it a gas tax. It had to be an assessment. And then we put in language, had to be on projects, 10 years or longer, certain criteria to spend that money. Well, that's just notwithstanding the language. Does that sort of muddy the waters when we want to go out and bond again with the bond rating people saying, hey, this was set up specifically for long-term projects. You're just sort of notwithstanding. Instead of going through the procedure of just backing it out of projects. So just notwithstanding.
I don't think so, right? So it'd be based on sort of forecasted revenues that would be generated from the TIP fund to pay for future bond obligations. This is just sort of one-time money that's sort of sitting at the bottom of the fund. It's not really decreasing future revenues into the T fund by any manner. It's just sort of using some excess that was in there.
Yeah, I just always want me to make sure we don't muddy the waters of, because it would be just as easy just to find projects to back out.
Yeah, I don't think so, but
Okay.
not a bond expert by any means, but I can't imagine it'd have an impact on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd ask the agency to join us for a second if they could. Now that we've had a few days to pass, I guess the 11-page amendment that came out of Ways and Means, I'd like to get the testimony of the agency's review and feedback on the Ways and Means amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Michelle Boomhauer, Vermont Agency of Transportation. I'll start first with the commentary on the $2.2 million estimated fund balance in the tip at the end of FY 27. So based on, that's the estimate of what we expect there to be in that fund balance at the end of FY 27. Since the fund balance is not annual revenue, it's not dictated by the economist projections. And so it's kind of outside of that. And it's, as Logan mentioned, had a fund balance for many years. And we see that as analogous to the T-fund reserve. And therefore, we didn't budget it and as a fund balance item. And we didn't submit it as part of our budget because we don't want to rely on one-time revenues. So that would we would consider that a one-time revenue source. We also do have concerns similar to the questions brought up by Representative Corcoran related to the nature of the TIB, and is this, a way of, washing these monies through the T-fund to remove the characteristics that are demanded in statute for the TIB, use of TIB funds. So those are questions that we have brought up. As it relates to the 11 pages added by the House Ways and Means Committee, those were added with very little time for us to digest them. We have had major concerns, which we did express in our testimony to Ways and Means. The structure the agency had put forth for the MBUF was one whereby there would be kind of an estimated amount that we average drivers use each year. And that would be what you pay at the beginning of the assessment period, which would be your first inspection, or excuse me, it would be the first registration after the 1st of January 2027. And you would have the option, and we estimated that to be about $157. You would have the option of paying that all at once up front, paying it quarterly or monthly, whatever your budget met. And then at the end, depending on how much you put in, what your miles were when you got to your second inspection, we would determine with reconciliation whether you had overpaid us because you drove less miles than the average, or you had underpaid us, at which time you would owe for the miles you have driven. And so we're always projecting forward, not in arrears. We're mostly concerned about doing a reconciliation after the fact because of all of the fringe cases that will have to be reconciled when somebody sells a vehicle. And so you go to sell the vehicle, it may or may not be a transaction where you personally have to be in touch with the MV, but the new owner does. And so how do we collect those monies from the person who has driven them in the event that they have a transaction of that nature? We're concerned that it'll be much more overly complicated than the process we had put forward for this program.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Corcoran.
I just did a quick question on the, was any money anticipated for the MBUF from January to June incorporated in this year's budget?
Yes. Yeah, because we did have the expectation that there would be revenues coming in, from the prepayments of your mileage-based user fee for those folks who were in that beginning period in the first 6 months. And I don't recall what the exact amount was, but not only does it sort of remove those revenues from the scenario, but there may be a case where people, go on a payment plan and then they're not paying their FY 28 MBUF until, later, much later, could be even in 29. So it'll be difficult to manage the estimation of the revenues. for not only the commencement, but also the, kind of all of 28.
Yeah, see, I guess that's news to me. 'Cause
29.
I didn't think there was any money in there because when we had Lane was saying that any money that was generated was gonna go to the towns. And there really wasn't much pushback, so I'm sort of, didn't realize that, so I guess I'm thankful for the clarification of your answer. It'd be interesting to see how much was budgeted. You can get that from Candace. that'd be
Yeah.
good.
I'll look into that.
You got, it? Real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the agency, it was my understanding that with the new computer update system that you felt very confident that you could handle these nuances too.
Well, I think we did explain that it's going to automate, almost all of the activities that will occur with the MBUF. But in terms of, if we get into a place where we're not getting upfront payments, we're getting after the fact payments, and then we start having people who maybe when they sell their vehicle, don't, reconcile their transactions at that time. And then we have to start going after people. And so it's the kind of going after people that could create more issues.
So just the concern that Ways and Means had that this would be an administrative lift for you, that was actually not the case.
That's not the case.
And in fact, this may be creating more, this proposal may be creating more of an administrative lift.
That's what we're concerned about.
Right. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how the agency feels about the use of the one-time money versus TID fund versus the other proposal for local option tax.
So the agency only supports the governor's recommend, which does not include a local options tax. And so, we put forth a plan for use of pilot funds and a long-term plan, which would create sustainability in the T fund after the 5-year return of all of the purchase and use tax. So that was sort of the proposal that we support.
Okay,
All right, I think.
thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Things along one way. I move that we approve the amendment by Ways and Means.
All those in favor of the Ways and Means Amendment? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. When we report on the floor, we'll report that the amendment from Ways and Means passed favorably 7-4. We are now due in room 11 with Ways and Means for the student transportation piece